gives me a couple of hours where I'm not thinking about the terrible things that exist in life or the terrible existential realities. I'm just thinking I get lost in a trivial...
But it's the ultimate in meaninglessness, sports. I mean, and it's, besides the fact there's these genetic freaks, but I think, it's just one person wins, one person loses, and it doesn't mean anything.
Right. And yet, interestingly, it means as much as all the universe.
Okay.
It means no less. Who wins the game between the Yankees and the Red Sox means as much as the entire existence of the universe. It has no less meaning than that.
But what worries me, I agree with you, but the problem is that people ascribe meaning to it. And that's what I would love it if everyone went to sports and said, I'm just entertained, but people care. And actually, that's the thing. It is entertaining.
Well, insights can be extrapolated from it. I mean, Hemingway can write about bullfighting and write some interesting things to talk about. But when you lose yourself, in a apparently meaningless entertainment of some sort, a musical or a sporting event, it's got as much meaning as why you're on Earth.
Let's leave sports because we spent too much time on it already. But for you, not only is the universe meaningless, but you don't like nature.
Do not, no.
Yeah,
nature is not my friend.
I don't like nature. It intrigued me because of something you said that reminded me of something that Werner Herzog actually said. Did you ever see the movie Grizzly Man?
Grizzly Man? No, not to the best of my knowledge.
Okay, it was a movie he made about a fellow who lived in Alaska with grizzly bears for many years until he got eaten by one.
Was that a documentary?
This person made documentary footage, and it's a documentary, but Werner used this guy's own footage, which is remarkable footage of grizzly bears, to make a commentary on his life.
I may have seen it. But they didn't show him being eaten by the bear, right?
No, they don't show him. That's right.
I think I did see that movie.
But there's a line in there that reminded me a lot of something you wrote, which is he's looking at one point near the end of the movie. They actually have the footage. It was near the end of the season, and they think that he's looking at the bear that eventually ate him.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, look, and there's a close up, and he says, look in those eyes. That's indifference. It's not Mother Nature. Nature doesn't care about you. It's the big mistake that he made and that people make is somehow thinking that nature cares about you, but nature's indifferent. In fact, it's worse. It's banal. Well, he doesn't say this, but you say it. It's banal. The indifference of the universe is almost evil. And you said when even in looking at a beautiful scene, when you look more closely, you see violence and chaos and murder and cannibalism. And when you look closely at nature, you find it is not your friend, and which is almost the same as looking at a bear and saying it's not your friend. It's going to eat you if it's hungry.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm agreeing with everything you're saying.
Okay, but I find that intriguing. When I read that, it suddenly hit me why you like New York so much, because it's the opposite of nature.
It's like cities.
Because New York's a city, and I was reading and I was thinking about this in terms of the movie Shadows and Fog that you made, where the night is dangerous, and it's not. And what rescues the person is civilization. The being alone either in a dark or in a natural without the trappings of civilization around you is what's terrifying.
Yes, I agree.
But then that's interesting to me. So you're kind of anti-Rousseauian in a sense, sort of that man was born free but lives forever in chains. Okay, so I think he viewed the primeval man before society as the ultimate free being, and society imposes chains on that person. But in some sense, you're saying actually it's the opposite. Society provides a safety net.
Yes, a structure and a civilization. If I walk out into the street, I live in an environment that has other families and restaurants and museums and schools and libraries and theaters and I live in a civilized, structured place. Whereas if I'm out in the wild, but I learned this when I was a little kid. I could see, that animals bite and smell and bark and lick, and I mean, there's nothing to commend them to me. Other people go crazy.
You never had an animal?
No.
Never.
Yeah, when I was a little kid, I didn't like it. I thought that I would like a dog because every kid had a dog. And when I got the dog, it was a big nothing. I mean, the first couple of days, you were excited. But then you have to walk the dog, and the dog runs around the house and makes noise and jumps on the couch and barks. And, and I think to myself, what's the pleasure here? But of course, billions of people could not disagree with me more fervently. I was never a pet lover. Cats, dogs, birds, fish.
Or nature. And the other thing you like. I remember trying to convince you to come out to Arizona in the wintertime.
Right.
And you said no way. And then I read you said you hate sunshine. Is that because you're a red hair?
I never liked sunshine. I don't see the it sounds so neurotic, but the sunshine, the rays of the sun produce cancer. Forget about that. I'm not someone who's intimidated that way. I mean, but they cause heat. I don't like that. When it's too hot. And the light that it casts is harsh and unpleasant. So when I get up in the morning and I open my Venetian blinds and it's sun, once in a while, that's nice, once in a while. But it's much nicer if I open it and it's a gray day and misty and moody and cloudy and the light is soft and the color saturation is beautiful. And it's if I go out for a walk and the sun's not beating down on me or shining in my eyes, and I'm seeing everything in a kind of gray, but not an unpleasantly gray. It's rather a beautiful gray.
Does that impact on in movie making? You work, of course, with cinematographers who themselves determine what lighting they like.
But we all want the gray days.
You all want the gray days.
They want them and I want them.
Yeah, everyone. So the harsh sunlight is not good for movie making.
Not for my movies, they're not, no. And maybe for nobody's, but there are times where we've made movies where we get on the set in the morning and wait all day long without doing any work at all till the sun starts to drop at 5 o'clock in the afternoon or something, and only then begin to work because the sunlight is not so pretty.
Yeah, but that's not just your view. That's your cinematographer.
Certainly, the cinematographers would be very happy, shooting in gray. When you see these Swedish movies and these British movies, they look so beautiful. The green grass, or even in black and white, they're so moody and lovely.
So the sunlight, nature, but we're getting back to the fact that somehow the chains of civilization are, for you, not changed. They're, in some sense, a security blanket. But at the same time, one of my favorite movies of yours points out at least one of the dangers of living in a society, and that's Zelig, that imposes on people the tyranny of society, of conformity, of the need to blend in.
Right.
Which is the part of the chains that Rousseau was talking about, the fact that we have a social contract. When we don't blend in well, society punishes us one way or another. In this case, Zelig's parents and other people early on imposing that on him. And he's the prototypical example of someone who wants to blend in.
Yeah, you want to be liked.
Yeah.
And in order to be liked, in the simplest sense in that movie, he could read Moby Dick, and if he's with someone who hated the book, he's right along with them. Oh, yeah, I hated it, and it was terrible, and can give reasons. And if the person liked it, he can go with that person. And anything to blend in, to be liked, not to offend,
or to say you'd read it when you hadn't, which is I think what.
Or to say, but because
I think he was when he was hypnotized at one point, he was embarrassed that he hadn't read Moby Dick, as I remember. And it's interesting to me in that movie that it moves towards fascism. That at some point his desire to be part of
Yeah, to
blend in.
conform.
Ends up next to Hitler in the movie.
Yeah,
And you have I forget whether it's Saul Bellow or someone in the movie comments that it was natural if you want to conform. And I think you say the danger of abandoning one's true self to fit in leads to conformity and submission, and to the will and requirements of a strong personality, which naturally leads to fascism.
Yes, if you live in a fascist society, it's very hard to be an individual, and they constantly forcing you to live up to the rules of the authoritarian leader, and to, if you're an artist, to make your art conform and in any way not be outstanding or not be individual, and in extreme situations as Nazi Germany, and they're all wearing uniforms and spouting the same thing. And if you don't, the penalties can be very harsh. They would kill you. In the social situation, it can just be where you're persona non grata in the group.
But when I read that, to submission, the will and requirements of a strong personality, I couldn't help think of the current climate we're in some sense. I want to talk about the left and the right. Okay, so one thinks of Trump. I couldn't help think of the fact that, in some sense, this base and this need to, this xenophobia, that's a key part of it, of other, wanting to be the same, that we suffer from that on the right. That Trump's success, if you wish, is in some sense related to people wanting.
The right is always that. The right always wants a certain conformity. The right in any country at any time, and the left is always more liberal. That's
it is, but but I'm not sure it is now. But I wanted to ask you about that because that were you influenced in Zelig at all by? I know we've talked about this personally by knowing people who were blacklisted during the fact that during the period of blacklisting during the McCarthy era, where clearly nonconformity at some level was labeled, and then you lost your whole livelihood.
I do remember the McCarthys. I was young for the brunt of it, but since I appeared in that movie, The Front, and Walter Bernstein wrote it, and he had been blacklisted, and Marty Ritt directed it, and he had been blacklisted, and we hung out together for the duration of the shooting of that picture. I learned a lot about it because everybody, Zero Mostel, who starred in the picture, these people were all blacklisted. So I learned about it, and I knew about it from, because everybody knows about it, and I knew about it when some of it was happening, but I was too young to really be actively committed to a position on it.
Okay, but so that didn't play in any part in your thinking in terms of Zelig, in terms of the blacklisting on the.
No, the blacklisting thing for me was all centered around The Front, the movie The Front.
Yeah, I remember.
Which again I only acted in, but I did learn a lot about blacklisting, and it was a terrible and ineffective thing, and.
Well, it was effective for a while at suppressing people. But you said it's always that way on the right. But I'm a little worried that on the left we see the same kind of necessity for conformity right now. Universities, obviously coming from universities, I see university students not wanting to hear anything they disagree with.
Well, that's on the face of it, that's a terrible thing. I mean, that doesn't require any kind of real debate or conversation. It's just to a common sense person. You would think that a university, would not tolerate that it's a place where there should be a free forum for discussion, even the most unpleasant kind, and these things should be debated, and you're there to learn. You're not there to advance a social agenda. You're there, so I never have any patience with that, when a university stifles free speech. Now, you then get into some nuances here. I
Yeah.
mean, if some guy gets on stage and says, so go home and get your rifles and go and kill all the Jews, kill all the black people.
Yeah. That's
I mean, there is a line that a common sense person can figure out. And this thing is not rocket science. You hear a guy talking and he's trying to advance a political position that's hateful to you. That's fine as long as it doesn't cross a certain line. You can argue with them to death.
In fact, that's what free speech is all about, is to guarantee the speech you don't like.
That's the point of it.
Yeah. I mean, as long as you're not inciting violence, I think that's the key point. But we're seeing that the universities are now, not just the students, but when the students complain, the universities are immediately kowtowing, and you're getting this rule of social justice, of conformity that is every bit as restricting as you used to say the fascism was in one way or another. That there's that famous the Yale students who were yelling at that Yale professor when they talk about the ability to Halloween.
A common sense person will see that as, but
why? But the common sense isn't happening in university administrations. It's really worrisome.
Commercial institutions, whether it's a university, a television network, a Hollywood studio, a job in a business, they're very quick to succumb to the slightest kind of pressure because they feel even a small pinch here and there in their pocketbook.
Yeah.
And that terrifies them. They don't know how deep that pocket is going to go, and they get terrified. So a university or a television network or a film studio or a publishing house or a job, a business will buckle under at the slightest pressure. And someone like yourself watching that, or someone watching that, will say, God, that's so terrible. This guy listened to folk music in the 50s, and now he can't get a job because they're afraid he's a communist. But and this is one of the many terrible traits of the human personality. It folds under pressure. Look, you lived in Germany in the 30s, and you lived all over Europe, and you lived next door and were friendly with Jewish families, and your kids played together, and you had no problem at all. And then you got some pressure, and as soon as the pressure, you were ready to dump them right into the concentration camps. Shoot them, get rid of them, and because basically people are frightened. They live their lives in terror. They live in terror. The existential terror we were talking about before, and they live in terror of, they want only to survive. They don't want trouble. They're not looking for trouble.
Well, we tend to reward virtue signaling in all these cases, meaning we tend to reward in the communist era, in the McCarthy era, labeling the communists, in Germany labeling the Jews, and now labeling those who offend by their speech as being. And it's not just condemning that. It's just condemning anyone who is associated with that. It's kind of a really strong.
Yes, it's an insidious thing, and what happens is the first person gets fired, and a wave of panic comes in after that, and everyone associated with them gets fired, and But this is what people are. They're and it's hard to blame. It's hard to despise them or blame them for their timorousness or cowardliness, or
because people are afraid and
because people are frightened. They're living in a difficult.
But then, I remember those lines about first they came for the lawyers, and then they came for and then they came for me. I mean, ultimately it's there, but for the grace of God go I, is what seems to me to be the way to protect society. If you realize that whatever is happening to other people can happen to you.
Yes, but it's hard when it actually happens. When if you're running a school or running a television network, and somebody, gets in some kind of trouble, social trouble, you're thinking, what do I need it for?
Yeah.
I'm trying to make a living. I run this network. I run this university. I'm trying to earn some money and do a good thing. I could just as easily have a professor working here who's smart and the kids love, who's not connected to anti-Israel boycott or something. So what do I need it? And that's the way people are. They're not looking for trouble. And so most people are not ready to take a stand.
One of the last lines in Zelig is, one wonders what would have happened if right at the outset he'd had the courage to speak his mind and not pretend. And that really resonated with me to think about that, because ultimately it seems to me that the health of society depends on people willing to speak their mind and not pretend.
Yes, I would guess, and I'm only guessing because I know nothing about what I'm talking about, of course, is that it would work. That if the students at a university say, we don't like this professor because he's saying this, if the university said, I'm sorry, but he's a accredited professor and he's free to talk that way, and if you don't like it, you can drop the course, or if you don't like the university, register someplace else. If they took that stand, it would, I think, be just a very short time before the situation would be better.
Yeah, no.
That it would not suddenly, the university would not look up after a while and say, gee, everybody left. I don't think that would happen.
Yeah, they're still going to be there.
Again, easy for me to say because it's not my college, it's not my business, or the network is not my network. So I can be brave and and again, I'm not living next to somebody. I wonder if they took my neighbor away and said, we're taking away all people who are vegans and we're going to shoot them. Would I have the nerve to say, well, wait a minute, and they say, yes, do you want to make trouble? Because we're going to take away your neighbor and shoot him because we don't want vegans. I don't know how courageous I would be.
Well, personally, but do you think that because the movies for you are a chance to some extent escape reality, although reflect on reality, certainly, even if in your personal life, can you though make a movie then in some sense that like Zelig or something else that does make that statement, that hopefully through the movie making, can you do the kind of things that you might do in real life? I mean, in terms of speaking out.
You could. I'm not the filmmaker for that, only because I'm not a social or political filmmaker, because it isn't in me artistically for whatever reason.
But not directly political. But Zelig, in some sense, causes you to reflect on this. Obliquely.
I finish a film and I sit home, I think, well, what's my next film going to be about? And whatever it is, it could be a murder mystery, it could be a musical, it could be a romance or a drama, whatever happens to hit me. It's so hard to get decent ideas that as soon as an idea comes that looks like it will form into a coherent beginning, middle, and end, you tend to go with that because they don't grow on trees.
Yeah.
So I don't sit there and think, well, this is a good idea, but it doesn't make a social statement or it doesn't say anything. I don't care about that. I'm happy.
You're happy to have ideas. Well, that's a wonderful. I wanted to go into the ideas and the process you make and ask you, do you think you're first and foremost a writer or a filmmaker?
I think probably a writer. Because if they said to me tomorrow, you can't make any more films, not give you another penny, I would be, I would write. I'd write to the theater. And if they said to me in the theater, we're not going to produce any of your plays because we hate you, and I would say, well, then I'm going to write books. And if they said we won't publish any of your books, I would still write them, because if they're good, they will see the light of day eventually. And if they're no good, then I'm lucky. Nobody's publishing them. So it's a win-win situation. For me, the